you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you." Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel. This is God's word. I didn't so much procrastinate in writing this week's sermon. I was rather preoccupied, busy with thoughts of Ruth and tinged with sadness that the Presbyterian must sell our beloved Vanderkamp, just feeling kind of tired of our whole world. Between the incendiary remarks of politicians and the rise in cases of COVID across our country and the world, and suddenly I was staring down at the barrel at the end of the week. I'd read the lectionary texts, and I'd even done a little research, but I was getting a bit tired of the parables of Matthew and the weeds, especially given that my back gardens are just full of weeds, and I have no energy to pull those weeds out. So I decided to pay attention to the parable, and I'm just going to leave them there. And my first go-round with Jacob's dream, that we all know, of course, as Jacob's ladder, was just less than satisfactory. So here I was. What am I going to preach on? Until I received an email in my inbox. You all know that I love to travel, and I subscribe to several travel blogs or websites, and it was one subject line from one of these blogs that caught my eye. The subject line in the email was, "Sick of staying at home? You betcha." And I pressed the box. And there in bold letters was this: "It's never too soon to dream." Surely this was God's sense of humor. For Jacob, hardly sick of staying at home, is indeed running for his life, and about the last thing Jacob ever thought would occur as he laid his head on that stone in the wilderness was a dream that he would soon have that would change his life forever. I had to preach on Jacob. His is a remarkable story. It reads like a novel. Jacob, a little history lesson for those of you who don't remember all the ins and outs of all of our patriarchs. Jacob is Isaac's son, Abraham and Sarah's grandson. He will be the father of Joseph. He is one of our patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. He was a twin, born immediately, if you remember, after his brother Esau. And he was his mother, Rebekah's, favorite. Isaac preferred Esau, who says parents don't have favorites. Isaac preferred Esau because, of course, it was his firstborn, and he was also a hunter and an outdoorsman. One time, Jacob cheated Esau out of his birthright. But the worst thing that happened, really appalling, is that it was he and his mother who conspired to deceive old Isaac, who by this time is blind, into giving the blessing to Jacob and not to Esau, this transfer of authority and property. It rightfully belongs to Esau, the firstborn. But old Rebekah and Jacob, they're pretty creative. Rebekah makes Isaac's favorite lamb stew and bakes fresh bread just like old Isaac loves it. And she dresses up Esau with lamb skin and puts it on his arms, and so he feels like Esau and smells like Esau, and he sends him in to his father to impersonate his brother and asks for the blessing. And it works. Isaac blesses Jacob. And this blessing is irrevocable. And then Esau appears with his own lamb stew and expecting the blessing, and Isaac has to tell him that he's too late. He's been had by his brother Esau. Needless to say, he's inconsolable and he's angry, and he vows to kill Jacob, which would resolve the whole inheritance thing, but would cause some other issues. So Rebekah warns Jacob and sends him away to her brother Laban, and this is where our story begins. It's on this journey, fleeing from home, that first night, when Jacob is now cut off from his family, his home, his community. He's guilty of treachery, dishonesty, betrayal, greed. And he stops at the end of the day, and he lays his head down on a rock and falls asleep. He's not praying, not in a temple. He's really probably not thinking about anything much except his own survival. He's certainly not expecting to have a mystical religious experience, but that's exactly what happens. He has a dream about angels and ascending and descending on a ladder, and God speaking to Jacob, renewing the promise already made to Jacob's parents and grandparents. I will be with you. I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you home. Jacob awakes and looks around. It's all quiet. There's no one there but the rocks and the sand, the pale dawn light, the wind stirring. Did he imagine that? Did it really happen? You can only imagine that the hair was standing up on the back of his head, and he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place?" What's going on here? For one thing, he just experienced a mystery that he couldn't explain. He just experienced a reality that is mysterious and unexplainable, a reality that commands his attention as nothing up to this point ever had. For another thing, Jacob's intellectual assumptions are shattered. He assumes that God is in heaven, or in a tabernacle, or in a sanctuary, or in a church. He assumes that his life, as dreadful as it is at this moment, is of no interest to God. Or if God is paying attention, then God's pretty angry. Those are the same assumptions that we make most of the time. Sometimes we assume that God is basically understandable and on our side. But for the most part, we kind of view God as remote, our lives lived apart from God. We also think that God can be contained in our theology or our worldview or our religion. And if God is paying any attention to us, it's probably in the judgment mode as well. So what happens to Jacob is a radically different experience of God. What happens to Jacob is radically good news. And the experience of it is awesome. God is there, even while Jacob is in exile, while he's fleeing from danger, a guilty man, out in the middle of nowhere wilderness. God is there. Someone once said, there is traffic between heaven and earth. We are not alone. We live our lives in the presence of a reality that is larger than anything we can possibly comprehend. And that reality, that God, says that he will protect us and be with us wherever we go. And the rest of Jacob's life was lived with that reality of a God who was with him, who would never let him go. A God bigger than our religions, our theologies, our ideologies, our liturgies, and our creeds, however wonderful they all are. A God who comes to us in unexpected places. A God who comes to us in unexpected times. A God who in the fullness of time came into human history in the most unexpected of ways. In the birth of a babe in Bethlehem. In the life of a man who lived among us, who in his death and resurrection made good that ancient promise. This is the news, this is the good news, to which we turn when our backs are against the wall. Where can I go from your spirit? Asks the psalmist. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I am in hell, even a hell of my own making, you are there. Your right hand shall hold me fast. That's what our faith is about, ultimately. A God who appears in unlikely and unexpected ways. A God who shows up when we are running away from whatever it is we are trying to escape. Our faith is about a God who comes into the messiness and secretiveness of our own lives and says, I am here. You are not alone. I will be with you. And if you give me a chance, I will bring you back home. Our faith is about a God who transcends our reason, our rational theologies, and all the ways that we try to pen God in. Our God is determined never to let Jacob or you or I, determined to never let us go. And that is awesome. T.S. Eliot wrote, you are not here to verify, to instruct yourself, to inform curiosity, or carry report. You are here to kneel. Bono, haven't talked about Bono in a few months now, thought it was about time, wrote in one of his songs, appropriately titled Mysterious Ways, he says this: let her talk about the things you can't explain. To touch is to heal, to hurt is to steal. If you want to kiss the sky, you better learn how to kneel. One day you'll look back, and when you see where you were held, how by this love, while you could stand there, you could move in this moment, follow this feeling. Surely God is in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place? Mysterious ways of our